So I actually did my whole dissertation on the unwritten rules of work. I'm Dr. Anna Kalschmidt. I'm a culture expert and an industrial organizational psychologist, and let me tell you what I learned. I conducted a study a few years ago where I interviewed white and black women and men from low-income backgrounds who had experienced social class mobility through employment on what were the unwritten rules of work that you had to learn or were kind of forced to learn or felt like you had to learn as you moved up in your career. And I heard a lot of themes. Some of them are like learning to speak indirectly because people don't really, they're not candid with you. They talk around the problem. Learning to handle things with kid gloves because they felt like people became more offended more easily as they moved up into white collar environments. And, and things like learning how to be on a team that values individualism over working together, because working together and interdependence is more common in working class communities and is more common for women and people of color. But who these rules apply to and what the consequences are vary by the people, vary by who you are. So I interviewed black and white women and men, different groups. Some of them have talked about the same rules, but very often it impacted them differently, or there were different rules that they were held to. So for example, women, particularly black women, brought up that they were expected to be more assertive, but when they were assertive, they were also penalized for being too aggressive. And black women especially talked about the negative consequences they experienced when they were perceived as too aggressive. That isn't something that came up for the white men. Now, other things did, but not that. And something that I've experienced a lot of change. I've changed a lot of how I look at the world and how I interact with people, and it's very important to me to help people be more culturally competent, to learn the unwritten rules for that other people experience, because when it's unwritten rules that suit your life, that suit who you are and your culture, you don't notice them. You just perceive them as normal and the way things are. But underlying this idea of unwritten rules is the idea that there is one way to do things. That's the underlying idea. And that's not the same as having like an organizational mission or value statement. There can be a mission and values that you adhere to in your organization and that you expect people to do. That is not the same as having unwritten rules, which usually we just write off as professionalism, and that's not necessarily true. Actually, those rules can actually be against a lot of your mission or your values, and you cannot even realize it, but it can be holding you backwards from achieving those goals. And they're really passionate about now is working with leaders on how can we identify what these unwritten rules are and how do we discern what is necessary and what is helping you achieve your goals and what is actually acting as a barrier in your organization.